5 speakers, line up, please. Representative Carlos Smith, John Butler Book, Patricia Freitag, Bruce Nathan, and Steve Edmonds. Representative Smith, name and address for the record, 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. I serve in the Florida House District 49, which is East Orlando. My street address is 2237 Stonington Avenue, 32817. I'm a constituent of Commissioner Clark's. Hello. And I just want to say I love the costumes too, and I promise if you ask me questions, I will take them seriously, even though you're wearing crazy costumes. All right, so let's get into it. I just want to say that it's been a very frustrating legislative session on the issue of medical cannabis. And I want to start by saying that I fully support medical cannabis, but that I was also one of only 9 House members that voted against the implementing law because I saw it as very, very flawed. So I want to tell you I'm not here to defend Senate Bill 8A, and I'm not here to defend the restrictions on local control that Tallahassee has put before you and forced you to choose between a ban and regulating pharmacies. I disagreed with that. But I am here to plead with you to please not support a ban and instead support the proposal to fully implement it. The reason why is because this will have a direct impact on patient access and affordability. I understand that there will be dispensaries allowed in the city of Orlando, but the reality is that 100% of the costs of medical cannabis as medicine for legitimate patients is out of pocket. Insurance companies do not pay for even a penny of the costs of medicine for these patients. So not only are they paying out-of-pocket costs for the medicine entirely, but if they have the product delivered to them in their home because they can't travel to downtown Orlando within the city limits to visit a dispensary, the delivery fees that are added to those out-of-pocket costs can be exorbitant. Keep in mind, the whereas clauses that I read in the proposal that make the argument in favor of banning it, I think are comparing apples to oranges. Many of the whereas clauses in support of a ban are coming from studies that came from California and in Colorado. And the reality is that Florida's medical cannabis law looks nothing like the cannabis laws in Colorado and California. The legislature made absolutely sure, as much as I disagree with this, that they narrowly implemented Amendment 2, that they passed an implementing law that took as conservative as an approach as possible. And as much as I disagree with that, that has made the medical cannabis law in Florida already substantially watered down. It already limits patient access with caps on dispensaries. It already limits patient access because it limits competition with the number of medical marijuana treatment centers that are allowed. It already limits patient access because they've banned full flower and they've banned smoking cannabis. It already limits patient access because it makes it difficult for doctors to get their certification. Last I checked, there's about 1,100 doctors in the state of Florida who have completed the required certification to be able to recommend cannabis, but only about 500 of them in the state are actively recommending. You know, the example that I'll give you, and I know you're going to hear from the public, is that there are many folks, because of the fact that they have a qualifying condition for medical cannabis, who asking them to travel, let's say, from East Orlando, for example, and utilize public transportation to come to the city limits to get a dispensary, to get to a dispensary, is a major obstacle for them. The transportation itself is an obstacle. The cost of the transportation is an obstacle. And even though the medical cannabis law allows for one caretaker to go and pick up that product and dispense it for them and bring it back to them, the reality is that many patients who qualify under the law, they don't have a caretaker. They are their own caretaker. You're going to hear those stories. And even if they are the caretaker, because they're the only caretaker for that patient, they have to bring that patient with them. The patient is already limited to a wheelchair, and the process of having to go somewhere even further than they need to is a burdensome process. I know that you probably have questions about what happened in Tallahassee, and I want to, again, make myself available to try my best to answer those questions on why you're dealing with what you're dealing with right now. And again, I promise, regardless of your costume, I will take all of your questions seriously.
Thank you. So I sure do, and thank you so much for being here. One really kind of simple one, it's my understanding that mail order is a viable option for delivery.
It is.
Okay.
Mayor Jacobs, it's a viable option.
Right.
But what I have even here is just a sampling of the types of delivery fees and the fee structure from True Leave and Knox. Let's just use them as an example because they're the only two that have been allowed in the city's ordinance. True Leave will offer a delivery fee of $25 for regular delivery and $40 for rush delivery. And keep in mind there's a limited amount of supply also that patients are allowed to order. So that $25 delivery fee is 100% an out-of-pocket cost added to the out-of-pocket costs of the medicine already, and it's something that they have to pay every single time they order the product. The fee structure is similar with Knox. With Knox, it's $25 is the standard rate for delivery. It's expensive.
All right, the other question, pardon me? On that subject? Yeah, go ahead.
So when you say mail order, can you define that? Because it's not mail order. Yeah, because I thought
not
you
mail
couldn't
order?
mail. Yeah.
I thought there was mail order, thank you. There's not mail order.
I apologize. I'm not clear on what the difference between mail order and just delivering from a dispensary would be. But I do know that True Leave, for example, they do offer delivery at home. I mean, you go through the same process.
So let's know this when we come back, because thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I'm talking about literally mail order, and I thought that that was an option, which is why I don't think.
It's federal government.
We can't? Oh. But there's other mail order other than federal government.
Not mail. There's other
Well, maybe it's not
delivery
mail,
services.
other delivery services, which maybe takes us back. Okay, second question. And this really goes to the heart of the issue. That the way this is written, it really puts local governments between a rock and a hard place. And you probably addressed that before I walked back in the room. And we're just trying to understand why. Because it'd be one thing if the state government said, you have no latitude whatsoever in what you do. But to say, but if you don't like that, just ban it. And that is a situation I cannot ever remember being in, where we're told we want to be in a position of honoring the will of the voters and implementing something, but doing it in a way that we feel it best protects our communities against unintended consequences. We've done that with everything. We do that with alcohol sales, tobacco, we do that. And this is the one time where it's like, if you don't stick exactly to what we have, ban it. We really feel like we have a gun to our head that we better ban it. And the intel we have is that changes are going to be made next year, and that perhaps this was a situation where there were too few dispensaries or something, but the changes are coming down the pipeline, and we need to hold off until we know what the rules of the game are. The City of Orlando said we're grandfathered because we have ours, and so we don't have to worry about this. We're not in that situation. Please, Representative.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that it's important to talk openly and frankly about what the environment is in Tallahassee. I'm also equally frustrated that you all feel trapped between two bogus choices: ban dispensaries or regulate them like pharmacies. If I had it my way, there would have been much more flexibility and local control over this issue, as it should be. But as you all know, the powers that be in Tallahassee have been hostile to local control on many, many, many issues. So it probably shouldn't come as a surprise to this board that they have given you very limited options. I just want to push back on maybe the idea or misconception that more flexibility to local control is on the way from Tallahassee. It's not. My intelligence tells me otherwise. I sat down and I had a meeting last week in Tallahassee with the House Republican Majority Leader Ray Rodriguez, who was the sponsor of this legislation and who led on this issue to implement the law. And I asked him directly, I said, I have ideas on legislation that I would like to file to allow more local control because this is becoming a problem, and also to fix some other imperfections in the implementing law. What is the appetite right now in leadership on addressing these issues in the 2018 session? And he told me very clearly, he said, we will not be taking up changes on the medical cannabis implementing law in the 2018 session. He said that they were going to wait longer to see, after more time has passed, where the imperfections on the laws will become obvious, to possibly, but not definitely, take up changes to the law in 2019. That's too late. It's too long. And if you'll allow me to, I just want to share with you a theory of mine on why this has been put up to you in this way. I see right now the implementation of what 71% of Florida voters approved. So far, it's been a botched implementation of medical cannabis. It's been botched on many levels. Botched on the restrictions that they have put on access to products for patients. Botched in the fact that we're hearing from constituents that even though 30 days is the standard wait time to get a medical cannabis ID, that many of them are waiting months and months and months because the Department of Health they've not hired the staff that they need to process those cards. There's all of these parade of horribles that's coming out. And they know that voters are angry. They know that people are upset that this constitutional right is now being slow-walked by state government. And I think that they put these choices in front of you as a trap to share the blame with local government. When voters go to the polls in 2018, I think they're going to be upset because in Orange County, 73% of them supported medical cannabis, and they don't understand why it's still so hard and why dispensaries are banned. And by putting it on local governments in this way, what they've done is they've muddied the waters further, and voters are just going to blame everyone. But I fear that they're going to blame you because, look, the law is complicated. Medical cannabis policy in the state of Florida is complicated. But at the end of the day, what I fear is that if this board votes to ban dispensaries, that voters will perceive that as a vote against their constitutional right to access medical cannabis, and they will blame this commission. And that's why I'm urging you to please instead implement it. Because I don't know what I'm not clear that there are consequences to allowing dispensaries in Orange County. It's already substantially limited access. I don't know if any of you have ever been to one of these dispensaries, but walking into a medical dispensary was an eye-opening experience for me. I visited a True Leaf dispensary. It was like going to an Apple store. You can't get the product unless you are having a one-on-one personal sales conversation with the sales associate. All of the product is behind the counter. There's clean lines. It's super nice. It's nothing like what you would expect. And the reason why it's not is because, to be fair, part of the regulations on dispensaries, the standards on these dispensaries are already high. They're good standards. And why did they put these standards in place? To allow seating inside dispensaries, and why did they ban flower and ban smoking cannabis, which I disagree with, but they did it anyway. The reason they put all of these restrictions in place is because they didn't want the parade of horribles that came from California and Colorado. But I have to acknowledge that all of the whereas clauses in the proposal that tells you to ban this product are whereas clauses that come from studies in those states. Apples to oranges. It's not the same here. And Tallahassee made sure it wouldn't be the same here.
So we have a question from, sorry, folks. I didn't get a chance to go over the rules. So we're not allowed to have outbursts of noise, boos, claps, but this is a good sign of we're in favor. We get this, thank you. and we do watch and we pay attention, and it does matter at the end of the day. So Commissioner Siplin has a question, and then Commissioner Bonilla.
Yes, Representative Smith, thank you for your explanation, but I still go back to the fact that, of course, we're going to have a one-on-one after this meeting, but you recognize that this particular policy legislation is bad because you voted against it, but yet you come here asking the board to vote for something that you consider not up to par for what the voters voted for. And as it relates to the climate of Tallahassee, we all know that, you know, when you're in the process of committee and then you leave out of committee and then you go to actual session, that things change every minute. Even though leadership, they have their, I guess their, how would you say, their priorities. Sometimes their priorities change depending on the voices of the people, the lobbyist pressures, and therefore, I understand what you're saying about, you know, there's other counties that says, you know, we're going to ban it and we're going to wait until, you know, what the legislation comes up with for the next session. And so I understand, you know, your early conversations and the climate that's going on, but, you know, and like I said, hopefully we'll have a conversation further, but I find it hard that you are asking the board to support something that you feel is bad, you know? So.
Thank you, Commissioner Siplin. I want to push back on that a little bit, because what I'm not asking you to do is support something I think is bad. I don't think it's bad to support the proposal to allow for dispensaries to open in unincorporated Orange County. That part I don't agree with. I do agree with, I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't agree with the fact that Tallahassee has only given you these two options. That I oppose. But of these two options, if we feel like we're choosing between the lesser of two evils, I don't. I absolutely feel that the right choice is to allow these dispensaries, because I still have not heard a legitimate argument for why you shouldn't allow the dispensaries. I think that the Planning and Zoning Commission, as much as I respect their opinion, I think they got it wrong. And I also want to point out that the vote from the Planning and Zoning Commission was not unanimous. It was not a unanimous vote. And I also just want to mention, I know that this morning during the unrelated hearing, there were lots of concerns about funding for mental health and the crisis that we have in Florida, specifically as it relates to substance abuse, which is part of the mental health crisis, and opioids. These issues are directly connected. Why? Because over and over again, physicians are realizing, and they are stepping forward and they are speaking out, and physicians are saying that cannabis is an exit drug, that it is not a gateway drug, that cannabis is how many patients have been able to wean themselves off of lethal and deadly prescription opioids and be able to live long, happy, high-quality lives. In Florida last year, 3,200 Floridians died from opioid overdoses. How many Floridians have died from cannabis overdoses? None. None in the United States. None in the history of recorded medicine. I understand that there's been perceptions and there's been a stigma attached to cannabis over generations. But most people, as we're getting more research and we're finding out more about the plant, those misconceptions are melting away. And I ask what I believe to be a reasonable ask, which is don't fall into the trap that Tallahassee set for you in choosing to ban because you feel like you have no other choice. Allow the dispensaries to come. And the other thing I want to point out is that the Zoning Commission speculated and guessed that there could be, I think, 19 dispensaries in Orange County if you don't ban it. That is a huge exaggeration, because the market for cannabis dispensaries in Orange County is nowhere near that. We won't have that many. Why? Because this is a for-profit industry, and they're not going to open up as many dispensaries as they're legally allowed to, because it's not going to be profitable for them. They're still going to open dispensaries only where it makes sense for them. And some of those plans will likely include unincorporated Orange County. Why? Because, as you know, as commissioners who represent your constituents very well, there are very, very densely populated areas of unincorporated Orange County. And those folks need access. And it's an unreasonable restriction to ask them to find sometimes public transportation and overcome their own disability that qualified them to access this product, to travel an even further distance to go to a dispensary.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Yeah, I've had a high respect for you, and after this, I have an even higher respect for you because you've said everything I've been thinking. So thank you. And you've actually answered all the questions that I had, so I don't have any more.
Thank you, Commissioner.